And I'm starting the live in a few seconds.
Thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody. Today is the final day of SpaceGen United, and we wanted to finish up with a very important workshop that I'm sure will be of great value and use to you all. So it's my distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. Julie Chesley today to deliver this workshop on how to elevate your leadership. Julie is a lecturer at Pepperdine University and has had a distinguished career in the Air Force as a lieutenant colonel for 25 years. Julie, we're so happy that you took the time today on a Sunday to deliver something that is so essential to us as young professionals and students. So welcome as part of SpaceGen United. We are very grateful for your time. And I give the floor to you, Julie.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Victoria, and welcome, everyone. I appreciate you showing up again on a Sunday, and I'm really excited to talk with you for a little bit about something that I'm very passionate about. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get started. Let's see. Oops, let's go back. So again, my name is Julie Chesley, and I have the great privilege to be a professor at Pepperdine University and also part of Sync Up Leadership Group. I'm just really thrilled to share some of our thoughts and ideas about really elevating your leadership and growing your mindset. It's been a passionate topic for me for, gosh, well over 15 years, because I've seen the impact on me personally, as well as witnessed the shifts with those I've been privileged to work with. So as you all know, this VUCA world, maybe you've heard of the term VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world is really challenging, requiring more from us than ever before. We as leaders have to be much more agile. We have to make complex decisions quickly and effectively with unprecedented levels of collaboration. We need to work together, and we need to approach change in new ways, really increasing participation, connection, experimenting to get the results that we want. But to do all of this, we need time and a process for applied learning that supports what we call mindset growth. And while intelligence and expertise are important, they're kind of the table stakes, or in your terms, necessary but not sufficient conditions. We really need to be able to shift our mindsets to the next level. And this can be really challenging to do, because, what we know is over 95% of our behavior is driven by our unconscious. These unconscious motivations, values, assumptions, beliefs, and habits underlie the way we deliberate and plan our lives for good reason, because judgments are necessary if we're dodging an oncoming bus. But behaviors governed by the unconscious go beyond looking both ways at the corner. They impact everything we do. And so while we're aware of our plans and our goals and our intentions, to eat better, to get more sleep, to include everyone in the conversation, to spend more time with the people that we care about, we're aware of that. It turns out that most of our decisions, most of our actions, our emotions, our behavior depend on the 95% of brain activity that's outside of our conscious awareness. It's kind of below this waterline. We're, what we like to say is we're on autopilot and we're unaware of what we're doing. And so it's no surprise that it's really hard to lead during uncertain times. It all starts out so well, but then we revert back to old ways of doing things. Our brain really is wired to love similarity, stability, predictability. If we want something new, it's when we're planning for it. Our brain does not like change, but yet this is what we're dealing with. I believe. You know, complex environments full of wicked problems. I'm sure you're all aware of this. But the really good news is that we can use our mind to change our brain and grow our mindset. We can actually rewire the neural connections that shape our reactions and our behavior. And we do this with, you know, maybe you've heard the term "what fires together wires together," which really describes how our experiences create neural connections that lead to these automatic behaviors, or those ruts as you see in that picture there. You know, our brain cells communicate with one another via synaptic transmission. One brain cell releases a chemical that the next brain cell absorbs. And this connection is called, the process is called neuronal firing. Our researcher, Dan Siegel from UCLA, kind of describes it like this. You know, so if you play tennis, every time you put on your shorts and shoes and pick up a racket and head for the court, your brain is actively creating a tennis playing state of mind. You know, here you're primed to access your motor skills, your strategies, and even memories of a prior game. And if you're playing a familiar opponent, someone you know, you'll recall her moves, her strongest hits, and maybe even her feelings. And so sometimes this neural glue is flexible, enabling us to be receptive and open to new information, and we can be agile. For example, if your opponent learns a new hit or a new strategy. But a lot of times, some of our connections are ingrained and more sticky and more reactive, locking us into old patterns. And we really act very rigidly. So if they learn a hit that goes this direction, we still respond that way because that's what we're expecting. And this happens in every area of our life. It happens in work interactions, in staff meetings, in performance reviews, in get-togethers with people. But the good thing is, again, is we can rewire this and get out of those ruts by deliberately examining our patterns and our habits and our belief, bringing really what's below that waterline that I showed above and into the prefrontal cortex. Because if we don't, we're disconnected. Simply, we're disconnected. We continue working, and how many of you have done this, or even double down when we are beyond tired. Or we dig into a discussion that we don't, because we want to win. It's really important for us to win, even if it doesn't really matter. Or we lose hours of sleep because we're worried about a deliverable. Or, and unfortunately, what I see a lot is, people whose careers have derailed. And gosh, the research is not that great about derailment, where people, high performers that think that their career is going to be up here, 40%, the research suggests derail. They don't end up where they intended. And unfortunately, this is not about how much they know. It has very little to do with what you know, it's how you show up. And so the key is getting out of autopilot and developing your mindset. So when we talk about development, there's a couple of different ways to think about leadership development or personal development. Horizontal development is kind of the standard skills-based development that we're probably all familiar with. Do what we already know how to do better. In leadership terms, it might be negotiating or communicating or delegating or planning or some of these things. And there's nothing wrong with them. The problem is, it's pretty standard, and where people get in trouble is actually in the implementation of that. And again, so there's nothing wrong with horizontal development, but what we're seeing with the really good leaders is they're implementing some things from vertical development. And it's really rooted in going beyond skills, but in the way you think, ability to think in much more complex ways. becoming more adaptable, more self-aware, more collaborative. So when we're talking about vertical development, we're not talking about filling up a cup with more knowledge or more experience. We're talking about fundamentally changing the cup, making it bigger, growing your mindset. And in order to do that, there's a number of different things that you probably wouldn't do in horizontal development. It requires a lot of deep self-reflection, some experimenting with new behaviors, maybe taking some risks, putting yourself in intentionally ambiguous situations where you might not have a lot of comfort. And exposing yourself to perspectives that might be vastly different from your own. And so there's a number of different ways to do this, but I wanted to share with you today a process that my colleagues and I have developed, and we actually teach this at the Graduate School of Business at Pepperdine in the Master of Science and OD program. This process, and we go through it. I'm going to give you like a glimpse of this today, with just about going through the different 4 capabilities that we believe are absolutely necessary to grow, to elevate your leadership. And this model's premise is that our mindset, what we mean by our mindset is our attitudes, our beliefs, our intentions really matter in how we show up. And in order to increase our self-awareness and grow our mindset, we need these 4 capabilities. And again, today I'll go through each of them briefly. We'll go through a couple exercises just to give you a taste of what we do here, and hopefully get you interested in working on this yourself. So the first strategy is being able to use your attention to change your brain, get your focus, and build relationships. We call this dynamic attention. To really be able to lower that waterline depends on our ability to be able to step out of autopilot. But in a world full of distractions, this focus is a scarce resource. Too much stress, continual multitasking really depletes our executive function. You can kind of think of your attention as a flashlight. With a flashlight, you can turn it off, you can turn it on, you can put it where you want, you can, focus really broadly sometimes. Sometimes you can narrow it in with a flashlight. But if it's on all day and a bright day, what happens to a flashlight? If it's just on all day, it burns out. Sometimes the battery is dead. You have no ability to decide where to focus. And so, you want to be able to use your focus and be able to turn it inward sometimes. Sometimes it's important to say, hey, what's going on inside of me right now? What's going on inside of my colleagues? If you're a leader, to know not to just be worried about yourself. What do you have to know about that? And so if you have dynamic attention, if you're able to do this, you can use your mind to change your brain. But you need this focus. Focus is critical, because when we focus our brain in specific ways, we activate brain circuitry. It really changes those linkages between those brain cells. We can create new neural connections and grow more neurons. We can literally change our brain with focus. Attention and awareness, noticing what's coming in to our attention at times, our thoughts, is the only way to harness neuroplasticity. And so what I want you to do right now is just if we've got a pen and paper, I've got 4 things here. I'm just going to give you about 30 seconds. And these are just a few things. Give yourself a score of 1 if you almost never do this, and 5 almost always. So just look at each of these 4 things. And now what I'd like to do, I think I need to stop the share, is just write in the chat box which one of these is the hardest for you to do. Which one do you guys find the hardest to do? So we'll look at the chat box and see which ones, if you can type in there. Refraining from multitasking, absolutely. That's from Florence. What else? Unplug, it's so hard. Multitasking, yes. Yes, 3 and 4, absolutely. You know, a lot of times recharging ourselves. Multitasking, yeah. Regularly unplug, you know, it is so important to do this. Yeah, we see some of the same patterns from everyone. Refrain from multitasking. It's good. Seems like many of you then have put the complex tasks first. That's really important. But I'm going to go back to thank you for sharing that, because it is just, it can be really, really challenging. Let's see, I'm going to go to here. You know, when we think about multitasking, I think it's a pretty bold statement as saying multitasking is an act of arrogance. But as you know, I grew up thinking that if I could multitask, that was really good. And yet what we know, if we're trying to do 2 cognitive things at once, cognitive things, it changes. We go from our cognitive capacity drops from a Harvard MBA to an 8-year-old. You know, people think, the research suggests that people think that the people who say, you know, if they rate that they're good at multitasking are actually the worst at it. It's really what we're doing is switch tasking, and it takes just milliseconds or microseconds to switch tasks, but we lose where we're going. So, you know, one of the first things I do when I work with groups is, okay, you're in the room, this goes off. I often, if I'm working with a group, we'll put a bucket of water in the middle of the room and say, if I hear it, it goes in there, which often makes people turn them off very quickly. But the whole notion is that if we can refrain, if you've got things, just deliberately don't, I don't know where that came from, don't do more than once, because our prefrontal cortex, this executive function of our brain where we make decisions, where we can plan, truly is also very fragile. That's why it's so important to take breaks. That's why it's important to, you know, every hour to get up and turn your brain off, do what you can to unplug every hour. And, you know, the research is pretty clear that mindful awareness, sometimes it's mindful meditation practices, really can change the brain. It can change some of the, and it doesn't have to be long meditations. Just being aware can really shift your ability to function. So I'd like you just to spend a couple seconds now and just write down for yourself, what do you think you could do? What ideas do you have for yourself? And many of you might have teams that you lead or groups that you lead. What could you do for those? I'm going to ask you to post some of these ideas too, just so we can see some of the ideas of what might you do for yourself to just take one step in increasing your dynamic attention. Let's see what some of those ideas are. If you post them, go ahead and post them in the chat box. Meditate, yes. Even prioritizing is really great. And when you say focusing, it's just making sure, you know, it's great we have dual screens, but if you're going back and forth all the time, I can tell you you're not as effective. You know, even unplugging, going outside, if you can go outside, can really be helpful during the day. There is at the end or at some point, Victoria was we have a I have a resource sheet for you. And one of the great books out there that really helps you understand your brain is the one by David Rock called Your Brain at Work. And he's got many, many suggestions, and it kind of explains this importance of focus and not having too much on, he calls it your stage at the same time. We can only hold so many actors on a stage in our brain. And so how do we do that? Yes, and assigning tasks and working as a team, making things clear. You know, I'm going to challenge you to see if you can, in your meetings, see if you can have a rule of turning off your phone, or not challenge you for the next week to not bring a device into a meeting. Or when you're actually watching something else, just say, can I, not have this on? Yes, music can be very good. Yes, thank you. Thanks for those great ideas. Again, pretty basic, but we have to treat our brain as a valuable resource. I'm going to go back to share my screen again. All right. So the next strategy is using the power of all of you. Your intellect, emotions, inspiration, intuition, and health to thrive as a leader. We want to bring our whole person in, and we have an acronym that we use called SPINE, which is really the backbone for leadership development. And when we're talking about this, and we think it's really important for folks, because sometimes you only bring part of you to work, and you are you. And so, it's important to bring this sense of, with spirit, connection, our connection to something larger than ourselves that really motivates us and inspires us to great levels of performance. What's your sense of community and purpose at work? What are you interconnected worldview? This can really, help support you as a leader if you have this sense of connection and you work to be connected. In your physical self, it refers to our relationship to practices for well-being. Our fundamental practices for sleep, nutrition, and exercise, and really being able to manage our energy, because knowing what our body is telling us. And I can tell you, this becomes an issue, especially as your body keeps the score. When I was working at the Pentagon, it was really quite sad to see the stretchers come in because people had overworked, and perhaps potentially they had heart attacks or they just collapsed. And I can't tell you how many high potential folks that I work with that have no idea what their body's telling them, because they're so busy and they don't have any idea about how to manage your energy so you can actually get more done. The intellect, and again, this is way beyond IQ. I mean, any of you that are here right now, your IQ is up here. That again is, table stakes, but we're really wanting to be comfortable with ambiguity and complexity. So can you challenge your own thinking as well as challenging the thinking of others? How often do you deliberately seek out alternative or different perspectives? The next part of our spine is our intuition. Can we see patterns in unrelated data, not using logic, really kind of trusting our gut. And this is really a muscle that you can develop with practice. Organizationally, the research calls this anomalous cognition, knowing without knowing why. You just have this knowingness, and we can develop that as a leader, and not letting the logical part always, take over. And then emotion, this provides us with such deep understanding. And we can tune into ourselves and into others, and the research is clear, suppressing emotions is really linked to physical harm. And what, when we work with groups, it's like you can get so much information if you're paying attention to the emotions of others. So again, this this whole person capacity is another capability. You have to bring all of you to your life. So again, one more time, just by yourself, we just put one question for each of the spine elements, but think about how you feel at work. Do you feel part of a community? It's almost never. Are you part of something bigger? How aware are you of your energy throughout the day? How much can you challenge your own thinking? How much do you allow for healthy mind wandering? And how much time do you spend processing your emotions to gain insight? Just kind of score that for yourself. And as you kind of look at that, if you look at that whole part of spine, which do you value? What do you ignore? And then what's the impact? Like for me, until I started doing a lot of this work, I really valued my intellect, and at the price of my physical body. If I'm on autopilot, I'm just gonna work, and I think, well, I'll always sleep later, I'll always exercise later. But what's the impact of that? Guess what? I'm not getting enough sleep, and then my intellect suffers. So kind of look at yourself. Everyone's going to be a little bit different, but what do you value? What do you tend to ignore? Do you trust your gut? And what's the impact? And then what I'd like to do is just, let's get in trios. So Victoria, we're just going to give you about, 5 or 6 minutes in a breakout room where you just have a chance. First, introduce yourself, and then say, if I'm looking at my spine, what do I value? What do I ignore? And what's the impact on me? Kind of just start this process of self-awareness. So if we could please get folks in trios, that would be great.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie. We will do that right away.
Thank you. I can't see if folks are in breakouts or not.
Yeah, it's being activated.
It's nice to see people coming back. We'll give it a few more minutes to get everyone coming back. Some water. Wait till everyone comes back in the room. Oh, it's nice to see a few faces with folks. So I think everyone's back in the, I think
Yep.
everyone's back. Thank you, Victoria. You know, I hope you had some good conversations about what, you know, what you value, what, you know, what's the price you pay by not bringing your whole person in the room, you know, and when you're young, like all of you are, you know, maybe the price isn't so high, but if these patterns, remember we talked about all of it being underwater, or a lot of it being underwater, if we continue these, eventually our health will suffer, or our intellect, we won't be open to new ideas. You know, one of the things we talked about in our breakout group, I was with Jay and Marianne, was something that I do as a walk and talk with my colleagues, and just to take a break, but also to engage and check in. So get some physical activity going on during the day. But again, there's many other ideas. I hope you enjoyed your time to share about that. I go to the and so the next one, just in terms of time, again, we spend a lot of time, we look at our patterns around this and what actions we can take. But again, all of it is just what are the one or two simple things you can do to make shifts to get to know yourself. Another strategy that we have, or capability that we spend a lot of time on, is this notion of strategic clarity, really knowing your story, knowing your narrative, knowing your past, so it doesn't come back and bite you. Because, you know, as members, we said so much of what's going on, of what we do, is underwater. We're not aware of it. We are on autopilot. And some patterns that served us well in the past, maybe having very high standards or working really hard, served us well, but they no longer serve us. And unless we get to kind of know them, they're going to come back and bite us. And they won't, you know, if we're not clear on who we are, then we're going to continue just making the same mistakes over and over again, and our career gets derailed. And so what we do to kind of get the strategic clarity, there's a number of different exercises that we have people go through as they're looking at this. But one of them that I wanted to share with you today is a little bit, I think it's kind of fun, and give you a chance to just play around with it. It's looking at parts of ourselves and what we call the inner committee. So what is our inner committee? Well, first of all, we all have one. You know, members of our inner committee up here are parts of us, subpersonalities that can drive our thoughts, our emotions, our actions. You know, members of our inner committee all have roles to play. You know, some help us, some protect us, some perform, some are open and friendly. You know, some impact how you think about yourself. Some could be very critical. Some can, you know, act in self-defeating ways, causes tension or even pain. You know, they may have even a distinct face or a tone of voice. Like, for example, have you ever stayed in an argument with somebody you care about long after you know it was pointless? That was probably one of those inner committee members taking over. or a time when you got overly anxious or nervous when you had to do a presentation or bring something forward to a boss. So much so, you're so nervous, you kind of got yourself stuck. That was probably an inner committee member. Or just losing sleep because you're worrying about something. That's probably one of those inner committee members. And some of them are fast reactors and they just engage without a lot of self-awareness, and they kind of, drive our bus. If we're a bus, they drive our bus. They live kind of on autopilot in reactionary spaces in. Others are more intentional. But we also have in the middle this wise self, this it's kind of like our best self, more mature man or woman that is curious and compassionate and clear and connected. And this wise self doesn't get triggered. We're grounded, we're centered. It's, kind of unruffled. Now, this may sound a little kind of crazy to you, but I want to assure you that this is grounded in established psychological theories. It doesn't mean that we've got we've got multiple personality disorder. We all have these sub parts of ourselves. And kind of talking about this has been really helpful in our practice, and to us personally and to others. So I want to give you a couple examples, and we'll have you kind of think about your own committee, who's on your committee, but I'll give you a couple examples from myself and the role that they play, just to give you an idea. And again, I've named them because they're friends, they show up, and they're all there to help us. I think everyone's got their own, but for example, I've got Achievement Annie. That's a part of me that has very high standards for performance and production. She wants to be valued, have answers, and gets rewarded. She wants to look good. She really pushes me to be at my very best. She makes sure I finish what I start, I get rewarded. Most of the time, this part of me is a real asset. But if she's in charge and I don't know, if she totally takes over, I'm on autopilot, I fall into expert mode and I'm not curious. Or I avoid situations where I might not know the answers, so I avoid risks. And if I'm wrong, wow, she'll beat me up, so that I can't even listen anymore if I've found that I'm wrong. So, the personal toll, if she's in charge, if she's taken over, I make no time for myself, for coffee with my friends. I eat lunch at my desk. I work late into the evening. I don't spend time with my husband. It's a real recipe for burnout. And I get information when she takes over because, I all of a sudden I'm just starving because I haven't eaten, or I haven't, I'm thirsty because I haven't got a cup of water in hours. I also have General Julie, that's an executor, start, end, agenda, deliverable, produce. She produces, she's, on time to the specific demands, everything's organized, under control when General Julie's around. Again, if she stays in charge, and my colleagues and my people on my team, we all share our committee members because it's a way of talking about it without us getting defensive, is, she's annoying as a leader, because I expect people to toe the line, follow directions, don't color outside the box. When she's in charge, there's not a lot of creativity going on because everyone's afraid of her. So again, and I can tell when now, because I've really worked, it's like, oh man, my shoulders are tight, my neck is tight, my jaw is tight. That must be General Julie wanting to get my attention. And I need to thank her, but tell her to settle down. I've also got, part of me, a younger part, I call her left out Louise, but she wants to be included, high fear of missing out, feels sad when she isn't asked to join things, kind of thinks because she's not good enough, afraid that someone's going to find out that she's a fraud, or that, that they don't like her. And so when the boss asks for volunteers, she's like, yes, I'll do it. Put me in, coach. And sometimes that's good, but that can also lead to burnout. Her positive role is she's really empathetic. She can connect with people. She's very social, but if she's in charge, I can misinterpret everything. You know, I feel bad about myself. I'll spend the day going, gosh, you know, they don't like me and they didn't ask me to do this. And, you know, it's not helpful. I'm not my best self. And I can feel her right here in my throat when she comes up. So again, these are just some examples, and we're going to give you a chance to maybe think about who might be some of the people that show up for you. And again, we all have them. Most every executive I've worked with has got a very well-tuned inner critic that's there, but we're going to give you a chance to get to know maybe one of yours and just kind of play around with this a little. So we're going to intend that it's a committee member that it's important for you to recognize or that you want to get to know something more about. So as we begin this short exercise, I want you just to think of a situation where you got triggered in your life by someone important to you in the last couple of weeks. You know, it might have been a boss, a team member, or a family member. You know, something didn't go as planned. You might have been surprised by the result. You know, maybe it was a situation where you didn't listen, you checked out, you were nervous, you didn't include somebody, maybe you were abrupt with somebody, and you know, it's a time when you just weren't your best self. You weren't as effective as you want to be. So just kind of think about that and see if you can come up with a situation. Most of us can in the last few weeks. I'll just give you time to think about that. And so hopefully everyone's thought of a time when they weren't their often best self. And now I'm just going to invite you to do a short little exercise with me. I invite you to close your eyes and take a deep breath. And just imagine yourself on a walk in a place where you like to be, where you've got time and space. And then I want you to replay this moment, this time when you weren't your best self, for more understanding, for more information. You know, as you think about this interaction, one of your key inner committee members is showing up. Give yourself a chance to think, who is that member? What's its role? What was it trying? How is it trying to help you? Now, keeping your eyes closed, scan your memories to see if you've been in a similar situation at another time when the same inner committee member came up. Now, as you open your eyes, just take a moment to just jot a couple notes down. You know, who is this? You know, how has it served or helped me? Do you get a signal when it shows up? What happens when it stays in charge? And, you know, how might my more wiser self respond? You know, these inner committee members want to help us, but we don't want them taking over. You know, I don't want General Julie taking over. I don't want my achiever to take over. I want to call them in when I need them. But taking over is when these overused patterns, the stuff from under the waterline comes up. And they tend to come out when we're most stressed, when we're tired, when we're coming up against a deadline. These people show up, and you can start to recognize them in other people. I don't advise you calling people out on that, but I can often see when teammates are really stressed, like, wow, that's a committee member that's not really all that wise right now. And if we don't understand them and get to know them, they will continue to run our bus and, drive our bus, and we'll get derailed. That's why we see so many of these career derailments. People they're on autopilot. And so taking time to kind of understand your past really can help. I was going to do breakouts here with a pair, but I'm looking at the time. So I think, unless Victoria, you think people will stay on for, I just have about 5 more minutes, but it's valuable to share, but I don't want to go over people's time. What do you think?
We are happy to continue if you're happy to. Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, no, let's do that then. So what I'm going to invite you to do is just we're going to do a breakout room. So how about just for like 4 minutes, but share your committee members. I'm just curious, it's helpful to hear other people who showed up for you. So go ahead and we'll just do pairs just for 4 minutes. think folks are coming back in. Hopefully people have had a chance to share some of their inner committee members, and maybe you found the same critics or achievers or executors, or there's often many common ones that we all have. You know, they're going to be different for everyone. So do we have everyone back, or we still have a little bit of time, Victoria?
We have almost everyone back. We're just
Almost
waiting for one person.
Okay. You know what I like about this is typically when because we'll spend hours on trying to really do, like who makes up your committee? Who are the people that tend to take over? You know, who do you really like, and who might kind of get in your way? And oftentimes it can be kind of funny and sticky, you know, it's like, oh, there, that comes up again. But it's oftentimes whenever I feel triggered, it's like, okay, it's one of my committee members that's triggered, because my wise self is when I'm really in self, I don't get triggered. I can understand if someone's mad, and I just go, wow, something must be really bothering them, versus trying to get defensive. So again, we spend this time, and hopefully you liked having the conversation with your partner about these members. So again, that just gives you a little snippet of what we do to try to get a hold of some of our story so it doesn't cloud us. And just to explain, our last capability that we talk about, that we think to really engage, elevate your leadership, is it builds on the first three. You know, we don't grow our mindsets alone. You know, our brains are really social organs. You know, we want our own awareness, and we want good practices to support bringing our whole self to work. But where we're tested and challenged is when we're with others. So we really want to be able to have this radical accountability, hold people accountability, and have compassion in our work environments, because we know this will lead to more engagement and more innovation. So, you know, doing all of this is really important. Leadership is about relationships. Being an effective leader means having a choice in how you show up, not letting a rogue IC member drive the bus. It means having disciplined practices for top performance, and really knowing the impact of your behavior on others. As Warren Bennis, he's a writer in management, a pretty prolific writer in the field of management, said, we want you to be so aware of yourself that you get out of your own way. And the only way to do it is with disciplined practice. You know, it's that simple, and it's that hard. You know, it takes courage to get to know yourself. You know, I say this a lot of times with the folks that I work with in leading groups. It's really easy to be mediocre, but to truly lead in this radically different digital world, we need to shift mindsets, and we can't do it if we don't do the work ourselves. And again, it's not about filling that cup up more. It's about engaging it's about changing the container completely. So I've said to bring more leadership into this VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, we need to grow our mindsets using what we know about vertical development. We need focus and time for reflection and insight. I mean, we can't change those neural pathways without focused awareness. We must bring our whole self to the table and become smart, wise, and disciplined about actively managing our wellness and energy, because that directly impacts our ability to perform. We must understand and integrate our past and come to know our wise self and anything that blocks it from being in the lead, what patterns get in the way. And lastly, we have to develop the agility and deeper insight to be in resilient, authentic collaborations. I'm going to close with this quote, which I love. Without learning to know ourselves as intimately as we possibly can, we limit our choice. Life is not free without freedom of choice. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have had this time with you all on a Sunday. And again, some in the morning, some afternoon, some evening, but it's been a real pleasure for me. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to come with my husband to Dubai next year and maybe meet some of you. So I just want to say thank you.
Judy, thank you so much for your time today. I think that has been a really insightful session for us all. I can see the comments popping up from the delegates with thanks to you. It's really important to be self-aware, to reflect, take time. So thank you for priming us to do that as young professionals and students going forward. I think it's very important that we take the time to do that. And so that's it. That's a wrap, everybody. This is the final session of SpaceGen United. We ended in style. Thank you very much, Julie, for your time.